Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm very excited to share an overview of my capstone, which is an assessment of harvesting impacts on marten habitat at the scale of Indigenous traplines. Sorry about that. So we'll just get into a little bit of background. Marten have been referred to as habitat specialists. So they prefer mature coniferous or conifer-dominated stands, which have structural complexity and over 30% canopy closure. This is very well known in the literature. For example, a study from 2008 shows that marten make significant use of mature coniferous forest and do not make much use of younger or harvested forests. Structural complexity is important for hunting and denning habitats, and then canopy closure is important particularly in winter to avoid predation. I know this slide is a little dense, but we're going to get into a little bit of the literature about logging and marten habitat. So logging in Boreal Ontario is clear-cut silviculture, which mimics, is done to emulate natural disturbance. So this results in large openings and younger regenerating forests. So as corroborated by the literature, there's a relative low probability of use for recent clear cuts by marten, as well as avoidance of open regenerating stands. And in marten home ranges, percentage residual forest cover is higher and maximum patch size is larger in cells that are used by resident adult marten when partial harvesting occurs in these cells. What does this mean for trapping? So marten are obviously very valuable fur bearers, and trapping as a practice upholds sociocultural and traditional values. In order to trap marten, there needs to be a population of marten that can persist even with the harvest of individuals. And so what we are concerned with is there high quality habitat, enough high quality habitat to result in large areas of home range, which will result in enough area to sustain a population of marten in the trapline. And so this relationship between good quality habitat and home range size is not a new idea. It's been around since 1989. So to get into the objectives of our analysis, we perform non-spatial habitat suitability assessment. So this gives us an idea of the quality of habitat, and then these scores were put into a spatial habitat suitability assessment. We considered these under two factors. So a temporal factor of the present day habitat suitability versus 10 years in the future after 10 years of planned harvest, and then also at two different scales. So we're looking at the trapline scale itself, as well as a larger region around the trapline, which will, so spatial habitat suitability will then give us an idea on how much area is available for home range, and then how much can be core area, which will then act as a source for population. This is our study area. It is trapline KL031, which is an Indigenous trapline located in Timiskaming Forest Management Unit, which is in northeastern Ontario. The study region, which is the pink circle there, is a 16.5 kilometer buffer around the trap ground. And this was chosen just so that we had enough area to understand a large enough area to understand how much home range area could be in the study region. And an estimated 17.5% of this trapline area is set to be harvested within the next 10 years. So we used data from the Forest Resource Inventory for our study. So our method was to run the habitat suitability models for our present day scenario, which is 2020 in this case. And then we modified age and height of stands to 10 years in the future. So if stands were to be cut, we lowered their age to an age of 5 at the end of a 10-year planning horizon. If they weren't cut, we added 10 years to their age, and then we modeled the height based on their new ages. And then we ran our habitat suitability models again for 2031. These are the 4 non-spatial models that we considered. The colors just show you the common variables that they have that going into their input. So for example, the orange shows you the amount of conifer, and that's there for 3 of the models. 3 of these models are expert-based, and then the last one is an empirical model, and they were used in Ontario iteratively. I would draw attention to the HSM model because that's the model that's currently in use by the MNRF. And all models produce scores on a scale from 0, which is worst quality habitat, to 1, which is best quality habitat. And then we looked at 2 spatial models. So one is the Klamath Basin model, which was developed on the West Coast, and the other is the OM model, which was developed in Ontario. And I would draw attention to that model because, again, it's more representative of the kind of modeling we would see in Ontario today. And the OM model will give us, the OM model has higher thresholds for area and suitability. And so it shows us a more likely potential of the landscape to act as habitat for a larger population than the Klamath Basin model. Now we'll get into some of the results of our study. So non-spatial results at the study region, all models show a decrease in habitat suitability after 10 years of planned harvest. So this average goes from 0.53 to 0.48 for our study area. It's important to note that present day, we don't have a lot of high quality habitat. Obviously, our scores range from 0 to 1. So we're sitting kind of in the mid-range, which decreases to below mid-range. And this is kind of what it looks like in our study region on the landscape. On the left, we have 2020. On the right, we have 2031. I know it's a bit difficult to see, but the cross-hatched stands are stands that are set to be harvested. And underneath that, you can see the habitat score has gone to 0, which is the lightest color. So lightest color is worst habitat, darkest color is best habitat. At the trapline scale, again, all models show a decrease in habitat suitability after 10 years. The decrease is from 0.51 to 0.43. This is a larger decrease than we saw at the study region scale. And the largest decrease is actually shown by the HSM model, which is important because that's the model used by the MNRF currently. This is what it looks like on the landscape. So these are the results from the Allen model at the trapline scale. And you can see visibly in the northeast corner the change in habitat suitability score. So you can see the darker color, which is high quality habitat, goes to a lighter color, low quality habitat. Same thing with the HSM. You can see it particularly in the northeast corner and the southwest corner. You can see that dark red color, particularly in the northeast, go to a score of 0. And so you can also see across the landscape in 2031, there's very little dark red, so it's very little fragmented high quality habitat. Moving into our spatial results, which build upon our non-spatial results, all models show a decrease in home range area after 10 years of planned harvest from the Klamath Basin model. And so this home range proportion decreases from 38.52% to 30.12%. And the OM, which is more representative of the modeling we would see today in Ontario, shows that there's a decrease from 12.53% in home range to 9.44%. You can already see that the OM model assesses that there's much less home range than the Klamath Basin model. We're looking in the order of 12% versus 30% before. And the HSM shows the lowest proportion of home range area, which again, significant because it's used by the MNRF. The Klamath Basin model core areas also showed all models used to put as input for these spatial models show a decrease in core area after 10 years. So it goes from around 33.90% to 24.96%. Again, HSM model shows the lowest proportion of core areas in our study region and also the largest decrease in proportion. The OM model core areas, all models show a core area of less than 4% in 2031 after 10 years of planned harvest. The mean decrease is from 1.40 to 1.14%. So we're looking at under 2% of core area in our study region. And notably, the HSM model indicates that there's 0 core area present in our study region, even in present day, forget about after 10 years of planned harvest. So this leads to kind of 2 conclusions. Our non-spatial habitat suitability is mid to below mid-range. So that's habitat that is used by marten, but it is not suitable or preferred or optimal. And spatial habitat suitability indicates that there are low proportions of home range and core area. So around 15% home range, 6% core area in our study region. And it is notable because spatial habitat suitability is no longer undertaken by the MNRF in Ontario. So this brings us to the question, are we overcutting? Because forests can take an average of 40 to 50 years to come back to a maturity that is suitable for marten. And if harvesting continues, it will continue to shift the age distribution of forests to an overall younger forest. So this is kind of to illustrate that point. What we're looking at is core area in 2020 and 2031. This is using the Klamath Basin model with HSM suitability score. So we are not looking at OWAM because using HSM scores, OWAM shows that there would be no core area in the study region. But just to illustrate, you can see from 2020 to 2031, there's a visible decrease in core area. And there's specifically no core area left inside the trapline boundary. To the northwest corner up here, that area is a conservation area, which would protect it from future harvests, but in the southeast, that area is not protected. And so the question is, there's a potential for that area to be harvested in the future as well. And so we're getting even less core area as time goes by. And so the potential for the trapline to act as a area with a resident population of marten is threatened by future harvest. And so habitat suitability at the trapline scale is an important consideration for forest management because it has the potential to affect the practices and values of First Nations communities and rights holders. Some limitations to the study were the lack of availability and of data and assumptions we made about downwoody debris. It was inputs for 2 of the models that we used, and we don't have data for that from the FRI. And another thing would be that this is a model, so we don't actually have data on marten abundance. And so that would be a good area to explore in the future. And then these are just my acknowledgements. Sorry about the slide. I wasn't not sure why that happened, but thank you to Ben Kuttner and Jay Malcolm for supporting me through this project. I really couldn't have done it without their help. And then thank you to David Flood and Lauren Flood for the trust with this project, as well as hosting us. It was incredible to get up there and see the trapline. And to Aaron Palmer, who supplied us with all the data, and to my MFC cohort for an amazing program. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Aditi. I'm going to let David have the opportunity to ask the first questions.
Well, thank you, Aditi Chimiglich, for your time and effort and the great visualization of what we would argue is my grandmother's statements in 1999. Think about that, 1999, where she was already calling to their attention her deep concerns of a 7th generation trap ground in our First Nations community, in our family, I should say. And now in this sort of, forward-looking, what is the question of opportunity around the relationship we have with the trap ground and all of our relations, which are the animals and the natural space that it is. Her statement back in 1999 is you're already harvesting too much. And then my father has to carry that torch as an Indigenous land practitioner saying, whose interests to achieve forest sustainability are more important, the localized wood volume to the mill, or are you actually managing for full ecosystem services and habitat and animals? This is exactly the information we needed to see. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, if we understand anything about the Crown Forest Sustainability Act and forest management planning in Ontario, it's quite a steamroller exercise, and it'll be very interesting. And I would look to Aditi just to comment around, how would you roll up these statements in 2 or 3 bullets that would articulate perhaps on behalf of Lauren, that would say it's too much and you're putting a lot at risk to continue over this next decade fully implementing your plan as it stands. Off the cuff, do you have 3 bullets in your head that would be key statements?
Sure. I would begin with, obviously they have a duty to consult, but under the framework of truth and reconciliation, there is an impetus for addressing these concerns. And so obviously as rights holders and as stakeholders in forest management, this data concludes that there is an effect on in your region. And so I would say that addressing your concerns is valuable regardless of whether there was data or not. But obviously now that there is data to support the fact that harvesting affects traditional practices and values is quite significant. Yeah, I wouldn't really put it into 3 bullet points because it's a lot to say. Obviously, there's a lot of history behind the relationship between First Nations communities and forest industry. And so it's a difficult field to navigate.
And that's fine, Aditi. I wanted to test your reaction to trying to convey that into a communication tool. Is exactly what an Indigenous practitioner needs to do. And that would be without the data and information. I'm just trying to impress upon the group that's there that this is not an easy path to go down to create a positive outcome. But at the end of the day, showing where the gaps in information exist and that there is a question of certainty versus uncertainty, we might be able to get a reaction out of the government and the forest company.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, David.
That's great. Thank you, David. I'm passing it off to Jay now.
I'll just make one comment and then I got a question. I mean, if you think about the bullet, Aditi, I think I would definitely add the bullet of loss of OM core areas from this large area of that management unit. I mean, only a short time ago by law, forest industry used to have to keep marten cores because they were viewed as an umbrella of mature coniferous forest, which was going to benefit a lot of stuff, right? And now all of a sudden they got rid of that, and then look what's happening. It's really quite shocking. My question would be, I think David talked about as well when we're up there about, you know, there's that recent court case in BC where Indigenous groups went up against the government and said, we can't undertake our normal activities anymore because of what you've done to the landscape. And Treaty 9 is talking about doing the same thing. So I'm wondering if you think that this kind of study would help that kind of a law case?
I do think so, just because there is evidentially from the modeling, and we did run, you know, several models. It's not like it was just one model. All models show decrease in habitat suitability after planned harvest. So if it were like in the case of like just specificity, like if you know the members of this trapline were to take this to court, I think it could be beneficial as some sort of evidence for sure.
Any other questions?
Good job, Aditi. I do have a question. And that is, the trend's pretty obvious in your data. It's reduction of habitat. The scores are going down. At some point, presumably, there's going to be a problem where there's extirpation taking place. So did you ever consider how long into the future we could keep going down this road before those populations are really threatened to the point of extirpation?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it actually on this previous slide where there was limitations. One of the limitations that I had initially put down was the temporal scale of the study. And so we're only looking at 10 years into the future, whereas obviously, you know, harvesting is going to continue past 10 years in the future. And I mentioned that forests will take 40 to 50 years to come back to an age where they're suitable for marten. And so that's 4 or 5, 10-year planning horizons of which harvest is going to take place. And so, yeah, definitely there is a big time factor for or time pressure to address this issue before it gets out of hand for the population of marten.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. We have a couple more minutes before our break.
If
Final
I could
thoughts?
supplement, it's David. Sorry, I should have put up my hand.
No, go ahead.
If I could just supplement, and I guess this would be more for the broader benefit of folks on the call and in the room, is there needs to be an awareness or an understanding of rights protected through treaty and the commitments by the Crown of the day when they signed that treaty in 1905-06, which is not that long ago, is that the vocation or the way of life or the rights of the people would continue as if they always had enjoyed. And I guess that is the crux of the request that was made through why Wakatoan Development got involved, because we work with 3 communities across 9 forest management units. And we are using this as a form of a test case, if you will, to create an analysis, as Aditi's done, you know, to bring a voice to many Indigenous land users across many communities where this is the reality. And so when you think of the covenants of a treaty relationship, which have stood the test of time and are upheld in the courts, you know, as you take on your life as practitioners in forestry and policy, you know, this is where the rubber hits the road on what's really happening on the ground and in our northern and natural environments as climate action and change is facing us. And then look at what the trend is, and that's only within the next decade. On one hand, it's a bit shameful. On the other hand, it clearly shows the priorities of the government of Ontario at large, because what it's recently done with its environmental regulations through Bill 197, and just that outstanding question of, you know, the notion of doubling the forest consumption of wood fiber in the next decade in the current provincial forest strategy. Those are not intersects that are going in the right direction. And we're supposed to also meet 30% conservation in protected areas to meet those international Aichi targets. It's almost like a race to the bottom. And I guess, you know, not to put Aditi on the spot, but, you know, does that get you up in the morning, or are you feeling pretty bad about these findings, or is this motivating you to come and play ball and get out there and make some change?
Yeah, I was gonna mention it after you finished what you were saying anyway, but a large motivation for me to do this research project was this like socio-cultural aspect of it, and you know, the importance to both you and Lauren and the community. These results were what we expected with our hypothesis that harvesting will affect habitat for marten, and then obviously that ultimately can affect trapping. But I don't see it as discouraging necessarily. This is, you know, a simulation, and there's still time for at least our cohort to get out in the workforce and try to make a positive change. So yeah, I would agree with you. It's more about getting up in the morning and being motivated to address these issues that have been too long overlooked.
Oh, which.
Thank you.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Aditi. Excellent presentation, excellent conversation.